The thoughts, views, and comments expressed by Sidebar, its guests, callers, and advisors are not necessarily those of the management, ownership, or production unit of ILS Verizon Media Group. Sidebar, a 103.5 The Beat podcast, is a production of ILTV Studios and may not be reproduced or represented, in part or in its entirety, without the express written consent of Verizon Media Group. Sidebar is the intellectual property of Verizon Media Group. Copyright 2024. All rights reserved.
Welcome to Sidebar, 103 The Beat podcast, powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna, and today we need to talk about locusts. And yes, you did hear me correctly. I said locusts, which I'm sure you're like, Stephen, what are you talking about? Locusts, that's the thing that you only hear about in the Bible. Usually it's associated with some sort of plague or a pestilence. Well, it is a pestilence. It's associated with plagues. And I guess another time you'd hear it would be, John the Baptist. He lived in the wilderness eating locusts and wild honey. Locusts, of course, being a high source of protein. It's mentioned because it's supposed to make John the Baptist sound like, essentially, like, this is the roughest, tumblest life that a person can live. So in the same way, you'd say, oh, a monk, they live a life devoted to God because they're, all they do is pray and they just sit inside a room by themselves, reading scripture, planting stuff, helping the poor. And so in that sense, this guy, he's not indulging in any of the excesses of life. He's just eating locusts and wild honey. He's not drinking alcohol. It's part of the reason why some people think that John the Baptist may have been Nazarene. All right? No, sorry, Nazarite. He took the Nazarite vow because, elsewhere in scripture, it's like, oh, well, John the Baptist don't drink alcohol. Anyway, but that's not what we're talking about. I want to talk specifically about locusts, and almost in a scientific sense, because I think that there is a lesson to be learned in locusts that we can, and I dare say we must apply to our situation within the Bahamas. Now, the real question you have to ask yourself is, but what is locust? Because it is very easy to just assume, oh, locust, that's the thing that eats up all the crops and stuff. But there are animals that you don't sit down and you don't think about it long enough to be like, oh, wait a minute. That animal isn't what I think it is. The world that we live in is similar to that of Pokemon in a sense, because you have animals like boars, B-O-A-R, right? And you see these creatures with bristly hair and tusk, and they're like, oh, they're savage, and they gore animals and they gore humans, and they run through all sorts of things. You're like, boars are dangerous. And when I was a kid, you'd read these stories about boars in these far off exotic countries, and you think, oh wow, a country that has boars. But do you know boars are just pigs? They're just regular pigs. If you take any pig, those pink, cute they're not always cute, but because the bigger they get, the less cute they get. But those same pink creatures that we rear and use for food or whatever, right? If you take them and you just throw them out in the wilderness, leave them to their own devices, in about 6 months to a year, they go from being pink with very little hair, and they'll just start to grow bristly hair. They will grow tusk to defend themselves, and then they become sort of feral, right? And so it's almost like they become a whole different animal based on the circumstances that they find themselves in. And so you think that boars are these wild creatures, and that's why even when you look at the swimming pigs, you don't ever really see like pink swimming pigs with no hair. You see them, they're a little brown and a little shaggy. They don't get as wild because in a way they're still domesticated. We're still taking care of them because you're taking tourists to go feed them and stuff. But they have to fend for themselves on a level, and that causes them to have to adapt to their circumstances. And it's the reason I brought up Pokemon is because in Pokemon, animals can suddenly evolve from one thing to another, and evolution is a longer process that takes place over generations. What we're talking about is adaptation, and that can happen in an instant. Which brings us back to locusts. Locust is not a distinct animal that exists by itself. Locusts are just grasshoppers. The little grasshoppers that are portrayed inside storybooks as these cute little animals. Those and locusts are the exact same animal, and the only difference is the circumstances in which they find themselves. And because of those circumstances, they have to adapt. So, what makes a grasshopper stop being the cute little grasshopper that just bouncing about and you write little stories about, say, oh, the grasshopper did this? And what takes it from being a grasshopper to being this terrifying thing that every time we hear it, we think about plagues, we think about the wrath of God, we think about punishment. So, the main thing that tricks something inside the head is grasshoppers are solitary creatures. A grasshopper will be over here. He don't really mess with the other grasshoppers over there. Like they do their own thing. Everything's going fine. All right. But if there's a bunch of vegetation and then suddenly a drought or a famine where like the vegetation it goes away or something changes, this means that there's going to be less food. So now they find themselves around each other more and more and more. And now they suddenly stop being creatures that exist by themselves and they start being social creatures. All right. Now, and for the grasshopper, this is not a bad thing. For most creatures, something happens when they become social. Like a social creature has a better chance of survival. And that releases serotonin inside their brain. So now they feel good and they become a swarm. They all decide, oh man, being in a group works. Even though there is less food around, us being together is making me feel good. And this is we should all stick together. And now they start doing all the things that make your brain feel good. So they go and they reproduce more, which of course, anybody who's participated in the act of reproduction knows, oh, that feels great. They eat more, they consume more. All right. And so now they're eating more, they're reproducing more, they're getting bigger, the swarm is getting bigger, and now they are just tearing down everything. All right. The thing is, sometimes this will happen naturally, but sometimes this environmental change where you have a lot of vegetation and then suddenly, poof, no vegetation or there's a drought, all this stuff. This happens more and more because of modern agricultural practice. Well, relatively modern agricultural practice, right? This causes its own defeat. So now you have these practices, okay, we're going to divert water this way, or we're going to have all these plants growing and then we're going to stop it. We're going to stop it altogether. Now there's nothing for them to eat on as individuals. So now they get together. It's a little swarm, and the swarm keeps getting bigger and bigger, and they go through the whole countryside and they destroy everything. And now you have a swarm of locusts, and they get bigger and more aggressive and more reproductive, for lack of a better term, and more hungry. but they were grasshoppers. And they became this menace, this violence, because of the circumstances that they found themselves in. All right. Now, this is similar to the idea of what Bahamians love to call it black crab syndrome. It's not black crab because we have this idea that, oh, black crab syndrome is when, black crabs, if they're in a pen, they'll pull each other down. And the truth is, one, the original saying was crabs in a bucket, all right, by somebody in the Philippines. And it had nothing to do with color. So let's just stop saying black crab syndrome as though blacks are more inclined to do this than any other thing. Like the color black is so evil that it has to happen. So let's just disavow that from our lexicon or from our language. Get it out your mouth. But crabs in a bucket, the original point of that metaphor was not to disparage the crabs. The crabs are doing what crabs do. If you put enough of anything in a small enough space where they have limited resources, they're going to panic and they're going to try to get out. And so now they're pulling down on each other because there isn't enough space for them to get to the top of the bucket to get to freedom. They're all trying to get to freedom, but their sight is so limited, the space is so limited, they have been put in an artificial environment that they should not be in. And the circumstances in which they find themselves have them trapped in that situation. What am I saying? I mean, the difference is with crabs, the crabs don't go through a dramatic change of who they are. They more or less remain crabs, right? The grasshoppers, they become locusts. The pigs, they become boars. But the circumstances in which we find ourselves often cause this great and sometimes violent change. And the reason why I think that we should talk about locusts is because it feels applicable to the country, where presently I don't think that we are all within community with each other. And so everybody's going about doing their own thing, living their life, minding their own business. But then when there's not enough resources, whether that is there's not enough resources for education, when there's not enough food, because food is so expensive that you can't afford it, when there isn't enough jobs so that you could have money to buy food and buy clothes and the basic necessities of life. You don't have enough money to, what you gonna do? Live outside? You gotta live in an apartment because you can't afford land, right? When we find ourselves in these circumstances, right, and we buck somebody else who is in a similar circumstance, we may be, what am I saying? We're not going to be tempted. We will connect over that. We're going to say, hey, what's your issue? Oh, my issue is this. Oh, that's crazy, man. My issue is this. And that's going to make us feel better in that moment. And we may become more and more aggressive and blindly just raise the countryside, just destroy everything. And it is important for us to have this conversation about locusts in a time where we see all over the world people turning to, for lack of a better term, what they call fascism, right? They call it fascism. What does that even mean, right? But they call it fascism because there is something missing. The circumstances in which they find themselves have them saying, we don't get enough of this. And talking with you about this has made me realize this, and we get more and more aggressive. And we would be ridiculous to believe that Bahamians are any different than any other country in the world where there is an allure of fascism. There's an allure to say, this extreme ideology and this extreme view of reality, it makes me feel good, and this is the right direction to go. And so that's what I want to talk with you about today. The locusts, but also the enticing nature of fascism. Because we're going to get to this at the end of the show, but if we're all going to be social creatures, I think the word is gregarious. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, so I'm not entirely certain. But anyway, if we're all going to be social creatures, do we want to be social creatures that change the environment for the better for everyone in the environment, symbiotic? Or do we want to be social creatures where we are so blinded by our immediate needs that we actually push the environment to a worse position and a worse state? And after we've devoured everything, there's nothing left. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But we're going to take a quick break. You are watching and listening to Sidebar 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sidebar 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. Today we are talking about the enticing nature of fascism. And of course, to get to that, we have to figure out, what is fascism? And this is an issue that we often come across where, for example, I'm not a mechanic. When the mechanic tells me, hey, your left flux capacitor is no longer working, I don't know what that means. I don't know if you're making up words, right? What's a ball bearing? What's the Jerry Schiff Smogenheimer? I don't know. I'm not a mechanic. But these are words that he might know, and he's saying these words as though I should know them, because these are just this is the entry level understanding of how cars work. And so he's saying these words and I should get it. And people do it all the time, right? There are words that we say so often and so constantly that when somebody asks us to explain what that word means, we find it difficult to do so, because this is the most basic version of this word. For example, the word the. What does the word the mean? Right? I can tell you what the definition of the word the is. It is the definite article, right? So when you put the in front of a noun, this means that it tells you this noun is particular from the other nouns. This is a special noun. So fan is a noun, but the fan, that's a specific fan. We don't know the name yet, but it's a specific fan. And so that is how the operates within the English language. But we say the so often that who knows how to define the? Now, I do know how to do that because my degree is in English. But how often do persons use words? And I'm saying persons, meaning people within the Bahamas, people outside the Bahamas, because a lot of the media we consume coming from outside of the country, coming into the country, people are saying words like fascism and authoritarianism, right? And who knows what these words mean? But for those persons, these words are the basic words. It's difficult to explain it because the word, right? This is what the word is what we are trying to establish. So before we dive into this thought and this word, we must first establish what is fascism in the context that is being used today when it's bandied about. Because fascism originally was a political party in Spain. Yes, in Spain. Mussolini is in Spain, right? No, sorry, Italy. Right there, I was like one of those countries that speak another language. You have this party, the fascist party, right? And literally it means like it's a set of sticks, a bundle of sticks, right? And it's just a metaphor for unity, and within unity there's strength. That's all it initially meant. And it goes from a bundle of sticks to meaning this party. Now the party itself, because of this unity through strength through unity concept inside the head, they went around and it was a brutal party. They would go around, they kicking people in the face, literally going around punching people. If you disagree with this party, this political party, they are coming to your house, they're going to break down the door and they're going to beat up everybody inside the house, if not kill a couple of you. So that becomes associated with the idea of fascism. And that brutality, that intense violence through governance through intense violence is what people often mean when they say things like fascism. So they don't mean if you have see, the crazy thing is when you look at any governance, every state has been granted by the people permission to do a level of violence in exchange for organization and governance. We grant our state, the police, permission to do a level of violence. Now, there's a line in which we say, okay, the police shouldn't go that far, but the police have guns. The Defense Force has guns. Immigration has guns. We grant them, the prison officers, some of them have guns. We grant them a level of permission for violence. So it's not just that the state or the government or the people who are governing you are violent. When people say fascism, they often mean a brutal dictatorship or a brutal, like you have no choice in the matter of what is going on. And there are times where, because there is permissible violence, there's violence that we want the state to have the ability to do, and then there's violence that we do not want the state to have permission to do. But all of it is violence. And so there's a line somewhere. And when we see persons asking if we can give the state more access to violence in order to have a version of reality that better suits their mindset, we say we are marching towards fascism. And that is the concern that many persons, myself included, have about the direction the world is going in today, including the Bahamas, all right? Because where does it end? You know, and it's easy to think, oh, well, it's fine. I'll never be on the receiving end of having my head kicked in by somebody who I've granted enough power to kick my head in. But you have no say in that. So there are people out there, right, who are like, Stephen, you have locks, so you must do drugs. I don't do drugs. Well, Stephen, I don't practice journalism, but you're in the scope of journalism, so you must drink. You must be an alcoholic. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I clearly am too poor to have stolen anything, right? So I'm what I would consider a law-abiding citizen. Does that mean that I've never had an encounter with police officers? Of course not. Police officers have pulled me over numerous of times. Why? I drive a Honda. And it's not even a cool Honda. It's a mashup Honda. They still pull me over. All right? I have locks. And from a distance, they can't see the gray hair in it. When they see the gray hair in it, and I am 2 decades older than all of these officers who are here, they're like, oh, sorry, Pops. All right? They don't say Pops, but you see them realizing, oh, pulled over my uncle. But in addition to that, there are officers who have abused their power in order to serve purposes. I've spent not an entire night, but I've spent time inside a holding cell, right? Because someone thought that I did something that offended them. It was not violence. They lost no property. They lost nothing. But they felt, though, as though they should teach me a lesson. And so now I'm having my freedoms removed from me, all right? And this isn't when I was unknown. This is while I was a known person. People knew me. Like, half of the police station knew me by name when I was taken in to custody. Where is the level of violence acceptable? So it's like, I might have been saying there, hey, I've never done any crime. To the best of my knowledge, I've never committed a crime. I've never been on the wrong side of the law. But yet the law is enacting violence on me. So how much violence do I want the law to have access to? So I am worried about fascism because all it takes is you think that you are the right type of Bahamian, but you are not. And you don't have the ability to choose what type of Bahamian is the right type of Bahamian. Because one day it'll be you're only a right Bahamian if you have a Bahamian name. Then it'll be you're only the right type of Bahamian if you could go back 5 generations and prove that all 5 generations of your family existed in the Bahamas, somewhere within the islands. You know how difficult it is? How many of you could name, I didn't even tell you go back in every direction, right? Because the truth of the matter is, most of us cannot go back 5 generations on our daddy side. If you just stay on the patriarchal line, you say, okay, this person is my daddy. Who your daddy is, and who your daddy is, and who your daddy is. There's a point where somebody could hit illegitimacy. If you could go back 5, God bless you. But that does not apply to the majority of Bahamians, right? We have a severe sweethearting culture. There's no way. And so now suddenly you ain't the right type of Bahamian. You don't have the same level of rights. And that's just one example, right? There's numerous examples. All it takes is somebody daddy and sign the birth certificate. You can't prove that you is this person, and now you ain't the right type of Bahamian. At what level of violence will you find acceptable, even though you is a Bahamian, for not being the right type of Bahamian? What level of violence are you okay with happening to you? And so we must not only draw the line, but we must also realize, hey, this line that we are running towards to be to the edge of, to cross over, because we think, like locusts, this is going to make our lives better when we devour all of this. When we get that $100,000, this is going to make our life great. We must question, what is it that we find alluring, all right? And this is the fascism that I'm concerned about. So the problem is, in all honesty, fascism is sexy. Fascism, listen, I don't want to be the guy to say it, but fascism is superior in many ways to good old-fashioned democracy. Well, the version of democracy that we have. Fascism is more alluring, right? Why? Fascism tends to have simple messaging. It's not only that they have great slogans that are easy to say, right? But they can oversimplify what the problem is in our society, all right? It is easy to say, them people is thieving. But who is them people? And in which way are they stealing? Because there are laws about theft, there are laws about fraud, there are laws about all the things that we would consider to be stealing or thieving or whatever. So why has it not been addressed? So when you say these words, what do you mean? Do you feel like unfairly they have more access to the resources of the country than other people? Perhaps, but you're not saying all of that. You're saying they thief too much. And who is they? And how wide is this they? And every time I see somebody wearing a particular type of clothes, do I say they must be thieving? Every time a woman gets a promotion, do I say she only got that promotion because you know what she doing? It's the ease of being able to articulate these ideas that are repeatable that makes fascism taste so good, right? Because it's easy to say, it's easy to understand. Now, you want something that's difficult to understand? What is progress? How do we make the Bahamas better? It is easy to say the Bahamas needs to be better, but what does that mean? That's not something that's easy to articulate, because even if you start out by pointing out what is a problem, that one problem is not a universal problem. You can say we have a corruption problem, but that is a problem. We're not using the definite article. Corruption is not the problem with the Bahamas. It is a problem in the Bahamas, but it's not the problem in the Bahamas. You could say the issue is infrastructure. Well, infrastructure might be a problem in the Bahamas, but it's not the problem in the Bahamas, all right? And it becomes more and more difficult if you are trying to be honest to have a free-flowing conversation and say, this is what it is. And now this part, you must blame both the political parties as well as subsequent governments. We've not educated our people enough to be able to articulate and have the conversations that need to be had on a day-to-day basis. Only people who are old men who've had the time to sit down and parse through their minds, their experiences through the decades, can sit down on the dock and say, oh, you know what the issue is? And this is why we need a technical institute. And this is why we need X, Y, and Z. Those persons have the time, they have the resources, they have the experience to understand why this works, why this doesn't work. But the average voter does not know, does not have the time. And that is a failing on all political parties to educate their own bases with the good gospel of whatever their political party is offering. All right? That is a failing on multiple governments that have left persons undereducated enough that in the, let's say, if we say if we say that the last year before election don't count, in the 4 years from you get in to that fourth year, if you've not educated the people on what is needed to be done, what needs to be done, and what you are doing, then in the fifth year, anybody could come and swing them and say this and that. And we've had this conversation. I've had this conversation. They swing me when they say, ask them where the VAT money gone. And then a year later, they know where the VAT money gone when they get in power. That's a failing. I fail. They fail. We all fail. They swing me. They swing me with that one. They got me good. Never again. Whole point is, it is more difficult to say what is progress, because progress requires, we got to sit down, we got to do analysis, we got to figure out where are we right now, what are the measurable marks of it, did we improve anyway, what's the goal, where are we going, what are we trying to achieve? How can you say there's an improvement in anything if we're not testing? At the best, we might be we don't even know, are we even maintaining, right? Are we getting dumber? Are we getting smarter? Are we getting richer? Are we getting poorer? What's happening? That's not as simple a conversation as saying better wit or let's go blah, blah, blah. They gotta go. Change ain't coming as hell. And things like that, right? Not as an example, as a hypothetical, right? But it is difficult. And the other thing is, once you get into abbreviations, you done fail. If you ever have to use an abbreviation in your messaging, you have lost. You cannot keep up. You can't keep up with somebody who got better messaging than you, where the issue, you know what is the easiest message to get out? You could call any radio station in this country. All you got to say is, these Haitians. That's a full slogan. These Haitians. And within that, you've tied together all sorts of loose ends and all sorts of ideologies and all sorts of misunderstandings that people have had for generations and generations and generations. And your slogan is these Haitians. All right? And that's enough to mobilize and get people moving in a direction that, in all honesty, may hurt them. The people saying it. But that's where we at. That's where we at. That's what happens. It is unfortunate, but it is where we find ourselves. So fascism they got better language. They got better messaging, right? No one, and let's take it out of the realm of politics for a second. What is a better form of messaging, right? You could say, come enjoy our Bahamian burgers, grilled at the perfect 62 degrees Fahrenheit for food safety, made with this percentage of blah, blah, blah. You could say all of that. We have burgers that are so juicy, or I'm loving it. Well, what do you love? Now I have more questions. You've brought me in. I'm loving it. It's a superior conversation starter. Get to the point, right? And that's just one of those things. Now, the only way to combat the messaging where somebody can oversimplify a problem and say they corrupt, they don't care about you, they thiefing, none of them is real Bahamians. The only way that you can overcome such simple, repeatable messaging is that you must educate your base. And then you must educate people beyond your base, and educate your base to the point where they don't just repeat what you say, but they understand what you say. So when somebody else said that, they could say to them, "Dine how that is weak. Dine how." You have to give them, oh, well, why this hole over here? Well, why the same bill? Well, why they ain't pay this one? What is the proper messaging? Because if you do not give the education, not proper messaging, if you don't give the education, if you don't give the knowledge, if you don't give the explanation for that to even your own people, people are going to fill in the blanks, and somebody with an oversimplified message is going to come in and say, oh, that happening because they thieving it. You know all them people corrupt. You know all them crooked. You know they don't care about Bahamian. They only care about themselves. Who them? Them rich dog. It is a simple message that can only be overcome with education. Now, of course, it's too late for that, but just so you know, other issue is that, I mean, in truth, well, these are the two we're really going to roll into. You know what? Let's take a quick break. I want to talk about two other things and then the solution. because I like to be solution oriented. I don't like to just leave you with a problem. So we're going to take a quick break. This is Sidebar 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Play for fun, not for funds.
In the Bahamas, we play hard,
but we live smart.
We love a little competition.
A little excitement, a little thrill.
And at Idle Luck, gaming is all about entertainment.
Shared moments, celebrating the wins, and enjoying the experience.
The key is simple. Play for fun, not for funds.
When you set a budget before you start,
and know your limits, you stay in control.
And when you're in control, the game stays what it's meant to be.
Fun.
So play for fun, not for funds.
Must be 18 and over. Island Luck reminds you that it's only a game, so please game responsibly.
Welcome to Paradise Premium Foods, where exceptional taste meets everyday convenience. Right in the heart of Hurricane Hole Plaza, whether you're planning a beachside brunch, an intimate dinner, or simply restocking your favorites, we offer only the finest selection of local and imported goods, handpicked for quality, freshness, and flavor. At Paradise Premium Foods, shopping is effortless, service is personal, and every visit feels like a treat. From gourmet meals to go, to organic essentials and indulgent treats, this is your neighborhood market elevated. Live well, eat better. Discover Paradise Premium Foods, now open at Hurricane Hole Plaza, Paradise Island. Paradise Premium Foods, taste the difference.
Welcome back to Sidebar 103 to B podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. Today we are talking about the alluring nature of fascism. We started off talking about locusts. Somehow we ended up here. We not somehow. This is the thing. I actually have notes. Believe it or not, I have notes. Like sometimes you think Stephen is just talking off the top of his head, and he is. But so I'm going to breeze through two more points, and then get to the solution. Fascists, they just have better design. Right? They just look cooler. And I think that is because of the simplified nature of their messaging, right? They have a better aesthetic. And you could say, but what are you talking about, Stephen? That sounds ridiculous. But let's be honest, right? They are not shackled by the conventions that hold everybody else back, right? When you think about a politician have to, all these politicians walking around in navy blue blazers. All of them. It don't matter what party. Navy blue blazers. Somebody come around and they start dressing fresh like a Nazi, or they start dressing, because let's be honest, the Nazis was fly. That's some Hugo Boss stuff right there, right? I'm not saying that you should want to be a Nazi, but Nazis looked cool. We don't think that they are cool, but they had the drip was there. The drip was dripping, right? And that is something, if you cannot acknowledge that, then what is the point of this conversation, all right? But even if we look at other instances where there is a violent governance, for example, the Spanish Inquisition, the drip, you ever see them in them all red robes, just walking around, persecuting all non-Christians or people who they deem to be not true Christians? They look fly. They look cool. They look like something that you would aspire to. All right? And they didn't look like these stuffy other men. There was something distinct about them. And there is that, where oftentimes we who are the undecided, the unaffiliated, we aspire to look like what authority looked like 50 years ago. So all us want to wear a suit. All us want to drive a certain car. All us want to live in a certain type of house. All us want to be a certain type of way. And it doesn't stand out, and it doesn't relate, and it doesn't resonate with the average person, right? And so while we're all aspiring to this thing. Suddenly, these dudes come out. And they got a new design. And they're doing things a new way. They're taking a new approach. Because here's one of the things that they don't tell you, right? Some of the fonts that we use, these things survived World War II. These are Nazi fonts, but they look so cool. We don't say it, but it looked cool, and we don't know exactly why. All right, because the design is there. All right, and the aesthetic of this the strength and this distinct look, as opposed to, oh, I'm trying to look like, what's it called? Not the oligarchs. I'm trying to look like the petite bourgeoisie, the merchant class. I'm trying to look like those guys. Everybody walk around looking like real estate investors in short cargo pants and no socks and boat shoes, right? You doing that. Meanwhile, the guy who's going to make all the decisions that affect your life, he dressing in regular work clothes. He dressing in all black, like he's Neo from the Matrix, or he going to a funeral. All right, and so we must not be so tied to a look, an aesthetic, and say only this person can be taken seriously. Only this person. If you don't do this, you are blah. Because there are times that while you're looking over here, the people are like, this guy makes more sense, and also look at his trip, right? But that also leads to purpose and efficiency, which also ties back to the simplicity of the messaging, all right? If I come to you and I say, the problem is these people corrupt, then we know that we must correct corruption. Now, we don't know how and where and why they're being corrupt because we didn't dive into that, but we know people corrupt somewhere. They must be, because that's what we voted on. We know they thieved the VAT money. That is what we voted on. We know that they wasn't taking care of the school. That is what we voted on, all right? We know that it's their fault that all these people getting murdered. That is what we voted on. And so how do you then have the purpose and efficiency, or how do you use that to get the purpose and efficiency? Well, if we know the problem is corruption, then as soon as election is over, I need to see people before the court. And it don't matter if it's thick or not. I need to see people before the court because that is what we voted on. That is the purpose and the efficiency. It is clear, all right? If you say that the issue is too much people getting murdered, all right? Too much people getting killed. Well, what is the purpose and efficiency behind that? I want to see police lights every hour on the hour in the ghetto. I want to see sirens and police constantly, day and night. I want every hour on the hour, through your window, you could see the police lights. Not community policing, by the way. Not a situation where the police get out of their vehicles and every hour on the hour, they walk around and say, oh, hello, Miss Rule. Hello, Mr. Thompson. Hey, Mr. Johnson. Hey, Frankie. But everybody knows the police, and the police knows everybody inside this area. So if something happened, these people know, let me call Officer Don. Let me call Officer Rule, Johnson, Phil, Adley, whatever, right? Let me call this officer, say, oh, the boys around the corner, they smoking something, blah, blah, blah. Nah, I want them getting no trouble. If you could just talk to them. Officer come there and say, man, listen, guys, I ain't trying to jam nobody up, but y'all can't be doing X, Y, and Z. Not that level of community policing. What we want is people with bulletproof vests and AK-47s driving through the area every hour, on the hour, making sure that everybody know we have permission to do violence. Or at least the perception of that. Because that was what was promised. If you say, hey, too much murder. Murder. Bang. And so that purpose and efficiency, it's easier to act on as opposed to a 58-page document explaining what progress looks like, what freedom looks like. But it's easy. It's sweet. I ain't gonna lie to you. While talking about it, not only are these things that I have fallen for, I dare say, under the right circumstances, I might fall for them again. Under the right circumstances, you might fall for it again. If you're hungry, you're hungry. This is the issue with the locusts. The circumstances in which we find ourselves. I could argue till the cows come home, until I become blue in the face, until I crop out in front of you. It doesn't matter. Because if at the end of the day, you don't have enough food to eat, you don't have a place to sleep that is secure, that you know that you can go to, you don't have a job to give you the means in which to secure those things, you don't have the time to sit down and have a family or be with your family that exists. You only have enough time for killing yourself out on somebody else's job to make them richer and allow their kids to go off, not only to college, but they could travel the world. They could go to Ibiza, all right? They don't even say Ibiza, they say Ibiza, right? They could go to Ibiza, the real one, all right? You only have time to do that, and then time to go home and try to escape the drudgery of life through alcohol, through drugs, through as much wanton sex as you could possibly stomach, through television, through mindless scrolling. I could say whatever I want to say. You don't have the time or the capability because the circumstances in which we find ourselves is the problem. And so, what is then the solution? The solution is not no to fascism. It is if we know that we are primed for fascism, because there are many a problem inside the Bahamas, and it is very easy for somebody to come up with a slogan and say, this is the problem. This is the problem, not a problem, and this is how you fix the problem, and it's something oversimplified and ultra simple. We must come with our own brand of fascism. You say, Stephen, that's ridiculous. Now, I agree with you. For at least, it's not even 5 years. It's been more than 5 years. This is from COVID time. I have sat with the thought and I said, babe, there must be a good version of fascism. How do we get fascism but good? And it took forever. And it took me dissecting it, because it's like, if I'm thinking of fascism as solely violent governance, or governance through violence, people oppressing you into doing the right thing, then that becomes problematic, because all it takes is the wrong leader. You could put all the power in the hands of a good person, but what happens when a good person dead? You could put all the power you want in the hands of a good person. What happens when a good person loses the election? Now the bad person have all the power? And then what? So it is not enough to say, we give you permission to do all the violence. There must be something else. And so we defined what fascism means, and implies today. So now what we got to do is go back to what is the original definition of fascism. And that's when you realize, oh my God, the good version of fascism would just be community. Because all it is a bunch of grasshoppers getting together and deciding, well, let's go tear down this forest. Let's go eat all the wheat in this field. That's the horde of locusts, the swarm of locusts consuming the countryside and destroying everything in their wake. It's community. Community doesn't have to be bad, but a bad community, it comes off a little fascist. It comes off a little, the Nazis are coming. It comes off a little bit, the whatever the Italians are going through, whatever. That's how it's, oh, these right-wing, everybody's trying to crush, they hate everybody. That's what it comes off as bad. But now, you could have a slogan in your community. And when I say community, think of it in a biblical sense. In the same way when Christ says your neighbor, and they say, well, who is your neighbor? It isn't the person who lives next to you alone. It is that person as well. But it is whoever is your neighbor. Whoever you come in contact with is your neighbor. In the same sense, who is your community? Who are you in constant contact with? Who are you seeing on a daily basis? Yeah, it might be your neighbor, but it also might be the people you work with. If we form a community and we say, Bay, this is an issue. We get to simple messaging. No abbreviations, please. God in heaven, no abbreviations. The minute you say, no more BPA, down with the LLW, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not a part of that community. But if you tell me we need more blank for our children. I don't even know what the blank is, but I could get behind that. We need more blank for our blank. Give me some simple messaging. Yes, we can start off with making the Bahamas better, but I need definitive goals that we can achieve, because if you have something that's specific, then we can have purpose and efficiency. Because if we say we need more schools for our children, we need more after-school programs for our children, we need more education, we need better for our children, and we say we need more schools for our kids, then if that is the slogan, and the people who make the decisions hear that slogan, the only way to effectively and efficiently to go after that purpose, you got to build more schools. You got to expand the existing schools. You got to put programs in place and say, okay, we didn't build a brand new building, but we converted this building into an after-school center because we are addressing the call, the simple messaging of this community. Now, can that work? I don't know. And then also, design. You could dress however you want to dress. You don't need to put on a three-piece suit. First of all, let me tell you something. These politicians wish they could dress like you. All us don't have to wear Androsia. All us don't have to wear tied-up shirts on the 10th of July. We can wear whatever we want to wear. You could wear whatever you wear, what feel right and what makes sense for the thing that you are doing. Let me not get carried away with the clothes, but that's really a subsection of it. Can this work? Well, here's the thing. Whether or not we wish to admit it, we, as the human race, are hurtling towards fascism, because fascism is the only version of community that we have been offered. And as a result, we all are like, well, at least they got a plan and I could articulate it. Like this Grand Bahama Port Authority thing, I honestly don't understand it. And I've heard it a million times. I have multiple friends in Freeport. I don't know. And I don't think that, and I never will. I never will. I refuse to spend my brain power to untie the knot that is the Hawksbill Creek Agreement to say one side is right and one side is wrong. I wish I could. I don't think it's that simple. I don't know what it is. But it's complicated on purpose, and that's not for the regular everyday Joe Blows. And so don't expect the everyday Joe Blows to care about it. All right? Not as heavy as and not to say that the people in Freeport don't care about it, but I think that even for them, they've resigned to that is a thing that exists beyond our powers. Let us know when you guys figure out what y'all doing. That's the feeling that I get. It is on us to not allow the only versions of community to be the violent ones that may end up doing us harm, the violent ones that are going to eat all the crops and leave the ground barren and empty. We need community. Unlike the locusts, human beings are naturally social creatures. we've been siloed apart from each other, and that is a part of the problem. And so we must address that. And hopefully we will. And not just during this election period. When election is over, this must still be what we are doing. Anyway, we're out of time. This has been Sidebar 103 podcast powered by ILTV. I'm Stephen Hanna. True God still.
So you want a space. But not just any space. You need something with a little more potential. So how about 1,000 square feet of room to play with? Superb audio and video production capability, digital LED wall, full lighting grid, and about 124 seats to accommodate a full studio audience with so many other features. Make us your home for your next concert, conference, and so much more. Honestly, the possibilities are endless. Here at ILTV Studios, we'd love to bring your next event to life. So what do you say? Do you want our space?